Hey, this is Opaloid, alleged INFJ, and I'm here with host Eric, ENTP. If we genuinely are an ENTP and INFJ, we would be classed as dominant intuitives according to the MBTI. And I came up with an idea which is something along the lines of what intuitives hate about you. And you is a broad category which we will refine as we go along. And we'll see what emerges as we go along. So, do you want to start off, Eric?
Sure. Let me make a couple initial sort of framework links here. One is to
Mm.
sensorism. It's racism against sensors.
Mm-hmm.
One is type bias or stereotypes in
Mm-hmm.
general, and the way in which and boxing people. Uh, and then also that links into a critique of MBTI that I recently watched on YouTube. I watched MBTV with Damon Gray, and he was critiquing MBTI and typology in general as being comprised primarily of people imposing type biases and stereotypes upon others, trying to box them and say, these are your limits. You can't be as good at this as me because I'm this kind of function type or whatever. Uh, and I actually began making a response video to that, but I never finished making it and never ended up putting it up. I don't know. I just got sidetracked. But my response to that at the time was people don't really do that, as far as I can tell. One of the other things that critique contains is the notion that people use typing to excuse their shortcomings.
Mm-hmm.
But again, I don't think people generally do that. I think they relate to their strengths and weaknesses in a set kind of ways that we articulated in the last video. But uh, the point is that what I do think happens, though, is that intuitives in general don't like sensors in general. And I think that certain kinds of intuitives don't like other certain kinds of intuitives in general. So
Mm-hmm.
I think that the NTs are by and large going to have a problem with NFPs, particularly ENFPs, if they display in certain ways, especially if they display political. I think additionally that your NTJs are going to have some problems with, I guess, your NFJs, because of course, with their polar or insecure FE, the NTJs are going to dislike the dominant or tool function FE of the SFJs. But in general, intuitives I think do have a bit of sensorism, and they think sensors are dumb, and they think that uh, they're oppressing us basically. Do you feel oppressed by sensors, Opaloid?
Mm-hmm. That's a very, 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 very loaded question. Um, it's a good question as well. I would say, and I think maybe the audience need the context of this. So I've been wondering about my MBTI type for a while now. I've been dealing with like stuff in my personal life, which I think has been quite confounding when it comes to MBTI. I've worked with different MBTI practitioners, and I've been typed as various different things. Aeroplane Eric, biplane Eric to the rescue.
Sure, go ahead. Sorry, it is a fidget spinner. It's what you're supposed to do with it. I didn't mean to be
Yeah.
distracting. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I've been typed as an INTP, an INTJ, ENFP several years ago, INFJ, and also most recently via Voltology as an ISTJ, um, and also via Voltology as NIFE TI, which basically means the TI oriented or subtype of an INFJ.
An
So
ISTJ?
no, 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 no. I've had two Voltology readings. One as an ISTJ, so
Okay.
SITE, and one as a INFJ, but as a TI subtype of INFJ.
Okay.
Yeah. So the reason I'm bringing all of this up is when I got typed as an ISTJ, it really aroused in me quite a lot of mixed emotions, and I think this keys in with what Eric has just asked, in a direct and indirect way. I never for the life of me thought of myself as a sensor. And when somebody actually turned around and said, "Oh, we think you might be a sensor, not just any sensor, but a lead sensor," I must admit, I did experience a certain amount of self-negation, or should I say external negation of the self and invalidation. And I have been examining myself recently, trying to process whether this is actually linked to some bias or prejudice that I have towards uh, S's, so sensorism, um, and SI in particular. And if you look at the recent video that me and Eric just did, you'll see that if I'm an INFJ, SI is in my eighth. So it would be a particular point of sensitivity for me. Um, Having like explored this in myself about the processes to do with S's and N's and stuff like that, I would say that yeah, maybe there is a sense of having grown up feeling as though there needs to be a limitation placed upon intuitive nature as a result of growing up in a sensory environment, not just in family, but also like educational system, etc., workplace, and so on and so forth. Um, I think even though the MBTI has this apparent or implicit bias towards sensors, I think a lot of it is predicated upon the roots of what intuitives actually grow up with, and what is instilled or supposedly try to be indoctrinated into them from a young age of how they need to operate and how they need to be and how their brain needs to work in a particular way. So I would say in a maybe a semi excuse, semi justification, but maybe actually getting to the root of the issue that, yeah, maybe there is an implicit prejudice to a certain extent, but maybe it's predicated upon very, very painful upbringings and experiences of lots of intuitives in who they think they need to be in order to fit in.
And I would also point out the one thing that complicates this matter a lot is that for both types of intuitives, they're going to have a very different reaction to one kind of sensor over the other. So if you're an
Mm,
extroverted sensor, those are the kind of sensors that I'm going to feel are oppressive. The ones who are always like, yeah, but just do the thing. Just do the thing that's already decided. Stop thinking about it. Stop ideating about it. Stop talking
mm,
about it. Just do it.
mm,
Those are the kind of people who are going to make me feel oppressed. In
mm,
contrast, the NI users are going to feel oppressed by SI DOMs or SI users who say, okay, but for example, here's an example where that you might feel oppressed by an SI DOM if you're an NI user. They might say something like, yeah, but last time you did that, you messed it up, so I don't think you should do it again. And you'll say,
mm.
well, but I was learning last time. Or,
Yeah.
I messed it up because I didn't know X. Now I know X, so I'm not going to mess it up this time. And they go,
Mm,
yeah, but I don't trust you to do it anymore because you messed it up last time. And that's going to feel very oppressive to an NI user. For me as an NE user, I'll fight back against it, but I won't feel oppressed by it. Um,
Yeah, that's interesting. So you think so for NP types, you think SE is the natural antagonist, whereas for NJ types, you think SI is the natural antagonist. Is that right?
right, correct.
Yeah, yeah.
And for ENFJs who have SI polar or ENTJs who have SI polar, they they don't so much react against it as display comical ineptness at it. So they'll just go and not take care of themselves at all until they collapse in a heap.
Hmm, hmm.
Whereas I think the INTJ INFJ reaction to it is much more along the lines of what you described, where it's like, God, this is a hassle. This is just having to get up and do this and then do that and then do that other thing before I can get ready for my day is in and of itself oppressive.
Yeah, it's as though for people who didn't watch the earlier video, I was saying something along the lines of hating the aspect of the rhythm of life. I guess that's what it is, and sort of like the discontinuity of it. So the notion of like, oh, it's X time and you need to go to sleep, or your body needs to shut down, and then it's X time, or the daylight is flooding in, and then you need to get up, and you need to have your daily brushing of your teeth, and you need to have your daily dump, and you got to wash your face, and you got to eat somewhere along the lines, and going through the rigmarole of like being on autopilot, going through the steps of these different things. It seems as though sort of like it's quite degrading in a strange way, and it also feels as though it's something which is enforced um, implicitly somewhere in your genetic or physical makeup, that you need to sort of like, these different things will happen, and I dislike the discontinuity of it, I think, to a
Hmm.
large part, because yeah, I've got like a visual image of a flow of water or whatever it might be. So I'm doing it this way, or we'll do it this way, and it's as though sort of like the SI is always having to punctuate that flow of water. But thankfully, there's stuff like dreams and everything like that, which allows the continuity to flow to a certain extent. But it's that sense of
It interrupts your intuitive meaning land that you would prefer to inhabit. You prefer to
yeah,
inhabit meaning town. Instead, you're being dragged back down to body town. Now, in contrast, I prefer to inhabit meaning town where, and it's a time relationship. So my expert intuition says time moves really fast. For example, if I want to build a bridge, first I get some metal, then I get some rivets, and I rivet it together, and I go across the thing, and then I have a bridge. It's very easy to go from idea to completion, right? And then if
mm,
you have to actually do it, you go down there and go, okay, do me have to carry each one of these pieces of metal separately over there? Jesus, it's gonna take all
yeah,
fucking
yeah,
day, right? So
yeah.
it interferes with my nature. It's like, and I tend to view SE as barbaric or what's the word, vulgar.
Yeah, what's interesting is, and I'm extending the visual metaphors that we've both been using. So I talk about like a flow of water, flow of river. You talk about building. It was a bridge, wasn't it, or something
Bridge,
like that?
yeah. It's
Yeah,
just what came to mind. Probably sparked by your water.
yeah. But what's now coming to mind is to do with SI and actually building dams. Um, and it's as though sort of like there might be water there, but SI seems to want to build a dam around the water, or a reservoir around the water, to keep it safe, to keep it stable, to keep it all in one place. And it's as though there's a restriction from anything sort of like being on the other side of that boundary, which is allowed in. Um, and I think that's what aggravates me. In my experience with ISJ users, um, I'm sure the same may apply for ESJ, but ISJ users, I have a sense that sort of like it's this, what's in here, what's boundaried off, what's kept secure, or it's nothing. And I think sort of like trying to gain validation, affirmation, love, or attachment, um, if you don't fit into that sort of like mold of what that reservoir or what that dam is very, very stifling. So I've experienced that not just in myself, but also having observed NFPs, so in particular INFPs. And I think it may also apply to NTPs, having talked to some people who are ENTPs and have had career problems. It's as though this notion of it must be contained within this certain boundary or barrier, this certain sort of like, in a very physical sense, um, locked and bolted and the whole works way of being, is very, very like limiting to both NE and I imagine to NI as well, because there's a desire for freedom and to just move wherever the water may go, as opposed to being stagnant or still
But it
held in one
works
place.
differently in relationship with SI for the NE user because
Mm,
we don't. I don't find it stifling. I find it because I see myself as the source of the intuition, whereas the NI
mm,
user sees their themselves as somebody playing in a world of intuitive truths. The NE user
mm,
sees himself as generating intuition. So, in order
mm.
in order for the intuition to be meaningful to me, it has to be of me and about me and by me on some level.
Right.
So it links back in through the SI. The SI constrains me in a useful fashion. It renders
Mhm.
the randomness into the shape called Eric. But for the NI user, this the shape called Opaloid is something that's in in the world, not creating it. And so
Mm. Yeah, yeah, that's. That's really interesting, because what I'm getting then, linked to what you're just saying, is that even for the NP types, so ENTP, INTP, ENFP, INFP, this reservoir, which is sort of boundaried and held, which is basically a reservoir of SI, is something that they themselves, even if they may have it in their fourth function, it's something that's actually appreciated and filled, from which they can then ideate into the NE. So if you imagine the water being held in a reservoir and the evaporation being the NE, so like the water molecules, which are the SI, which are in liquid form here, as they're ideated out and evaporating into the atmosphere, they may randomly jiggle wherever it might be into forming different ideas, different brainstorms, different associations, etc., etc. Um, does that fit with what you're saying?
Well, I don't know quite what to do with the visual as usual, but I will say that if you think about it, like, um, I want SI to mine's like a couple levels removed. So I want
Mm,
SI to constrain my NE to create a self for the purpose of you liking it. Okay? But
mm,
if I'm an INTP, then I want you to I want to learn how to get you to like. I want somebody else to help me with you liking me, so that my ideation that is happening because it's past the threshold of TI initially, can be rendered into a complete self, a
mm,
singular idea of a vision of a complete entity that stretches across time, comprised of the things they've done and the tags that link to them.
mm,
So it's less removed for them. SI as an absolute value, they say the thing that, if you look at it as like a sub instrumental value, the sub instrumental value is you provide FE for me if I'm an INTP, so that my ideation will render it will be the stuff of which I am created. Whereas
mm,
for me, it's like, help me render this stuff that I created into a me shape so that you can like it.
mm. Yeah, yeah. So if I'm hearing that right, and if I'm linking it to the whole reservoir, evaporation of water, visual thingamajig, basically you're hoping that the evaporation of all the water and the molecules which are in vapor form here will in some way condense into a solid shape, which is your SI down below.
But only for the only temporarily, so that you can validate that this shit I'm doing that can be shaped like an Eric, that you like that when it's shaped like an Eric, right? It's not for the purpose of being
And
shaped
it's
like an
shaped
Eric.
like an orange.
Well, like an INTP like Susie, right? Her
Yeah.
goal is so that she can have a well shaped thing that's shaped like a Susie, and she knows what it looks like, and she likes to revisit the parts of it and go, this is who I am, this is what I've done, and this is what I'm about, and this is blah blah blah.
Mhm.
This is who I am. They like to spend a lot of time doing that. Ultimately, they want the shit that happens in their life to fit into their thing that's shaped like a Susie.
Right.
But
Okay.
I just want the thing that's shaped like an Eric for you guys to go, I validate it. And then those things are more concrete in a way. To me, it seems more concrete because you can hang your hat on that. Yes, I got a bunch of likes on this video. It's something very concrete. That's like FE
Mm.
saying you get this many FE points, and I'm like, hooray.
Right. So if I'm hearing this right, then it's not actually our third or fourth that is the point of sensitivity or criticism or like things that we hate. It's actually our seventh or eighth if you're a N
Right,
type.
right. So if you're gonna be a sensorist, and you're gonna say I hate sensors, be specific. Say I hate extroverted sensors. Those goddamn extroverted sensors. Introverted sensors are fine, or vice versa. So Opaloid, by this model, you be like, I hate those goddamn introverted sensors, but extroverted sensors are fine. They help me take my NI and realize it has effects in the world.
Okay, so I'm curious then. NP type, so NFBs, NTPs, and the limitation that SI offers. Do you saying that it's not a limitation?
SI is not a limitation for the SI users, right? For those with the conscious stack, for NISE people, SI is either the absolute goal for INTPs, it's the sub-instrumental goal for ENTPs. So it's the step between the instrumental goal and the absolute goal, kind of. That SI brings together the NETI shit into a package of Eric that then you can like. Well, in INTP, their FE position shit so that they can get validation so that they know how it fits in their self. And so that's why SI and NE always have to work together, because the ideation, the intuition part of it is originating in the self and it's thought to be created by the self. Now, in a sense, it's just as inexplicable as NI on some level, because there's no will to it. It's not like I sit here and go, well, let me remember all the different possible options I could remember. Shit just pops in your head, whatever it is.
Mm-hmm. I'm wondering then, sort of like career advice for NP types, so ENTPs, INTPs, INFPs, ENFPs. Yeah, what would it be? Because the NPs that I've talked to, there seems to be a resentment of SI, but the way that it's being framed by you, and I can see why, is that they're actually seeking that. But should they actually be working in a SI frame or not?
They need to
Like,
minimize
how?
SITE. SI is fine. SITE is often mistaken for SI. So people think, because like I hate keeping records in classes. When I was a classroom teacher and I had to take grades down and shit like that and keep track of the assignments and everybody turn it in or not turn it in, I fucking hated it. But that's SITE. What I didn't mind was like, okay, let's start by doing that oral drill that we did yesterday, and then I'll riff off of it. I'll change it up a bit. Now let's try it this way. Now let's try it this way. But it's got a link to familiarity. It's something I've done before. I usually am gonna take some riff off of something I've done before. I keep coming up with new ways of doing things because I start with what worked before, sort of, and either try to improve it or start with what worked before, great, and fuck it up, which also happens. It's very trial by error. But the SI is there to help me keep track of which is a win and which is a loss when I'm trial and erroring.
All right. So would you say then that the key thing is actually balance, i.e., to have that SI component, but not to actually drown in it, to maintain the NE towards linking into the SI, but not actually be fully immersed in the SI at the abnegation or the invalidation of the NE?
Well, I think that for the NE DOM, SI and NE take turns. They basically don't occur concurrently. So the bottom line is I'm always going to be seeking somebody else to help me keep some track of my ideas. For example, right here, you're helping my SI because you're helping me keep on track. What exactly are we talking about? We're talking about sensorism. I keep coming back to that notion. If I were just rambling by myself, I would probably lose myself in the NE thread, might remember, might come back. It was something I had to train myself to do, as I mentioned. But the thing is, with the with sensors, then it's like ESFJs I find maybe bossy, but I like the way that they make food and attend to stuff that I don't want to attend to, especially if they're working in coordination with me. We're called activity partners because they'll naturally gravitate to the kind of shit that I don't want to do, and I'll naturally gravitate to the kind of shit that they don't want to do. With ISFJs, obviously you got duality in the mix, and it's a whole different ballgame. Then it really clicks into place. But the same thing is true for those who prefer extroverted sensors. It's like what you really want, and one of the reasons why we work well is because YouTube takes care of so much of the SE. We can do this without a sensor. We were just talking before this video. Who's gonna do the tags? You were bemoaning having to add 2 tags to the thing, and can you make that default? I'm like, yeah, I could do that. I know how to do that. I was like, okay, I'll do that. And I was thinking, I gotta go there and go. I already know what that is. I don't want to deal with it. But the thing is, you're seeking a little bit of SE. This requires very little SE of you overall, and the SE that it does require is stuff that is consistent, really easily with your NI vision. So you're able to render your NI vision as something's reality without having to dig a hole or do anything like actual SE-ish.
Yeah, I get it. I get it. Um, oh, there was something that was coming to me, which was what was it? 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 You've talked about NPs and SJs. So the other way around with NJs and SEs, you just touched upon that. You're saying that we actually appreciate SEs because they're out there doing it. Is that right?
Right. So an ESTP or an ESFP, they're gonna just as I ideate without necessarily remembering where I started or where I'm going. Right.
Mm-hmm.
I tend to leap at the first thing that is in front of my ideational eyes and go down that tangent. So too are ESTPs, but it's about executing ideas rather than ideating. So what they'll do is they just take whatever NI they got in front of them and just try to do it. What they seek is an introverted intuitor to say, wait, hold on, let's not go with that half-assed fourth slot NI thing you just came up with. That's a bad idea. Here's a good idea. And then the ESTP goes, or the ESFP goes, are you sure I should do this one? And you're like, yes, do this one, not this or this one. And he goes,
Mm-hmm.
okay. And then he does it. So if you see an SE done without any NI support, you get Donald Trump. He
Mm-hmm.
just does shit all the time. And he has no consideration or concern for whether it's a good idea or a bad idea. Sometimes he does stuff that I think is a good idea. Most of the time, it's a fucking terrible idea. Regardless, he just does it. So
Mm-hmm.
you appreciate that when they're implementing your NI, you see your NI come to fruition without having to do anything. It's your dream.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I'm wondering about constraint and barrier. Are you saying that the NI is actually more unconstrained than any?
I'm saying that the NI is constrained by its own correctness. So it doesn't need more ideas. It needs somebody to execute that correctness to move it to the next stage of the game. But
Mm,
any is not constrained by its own correctness at all. So what it needs is to link back to the self in a way that says this one works, this one doesn't, or this had this effect. Like I said, this is a trial and error process. It's not a trial and error process with NI. NI skips the trial and error and says, I know, I just need somebody else to do because I'm too busy knowing.
mm. I'm curious. I mentioned something along the lines of many intuitives growing up and being harmed by the process of growing up in a S-based environment. Do you think that's true, by and large, or not?
Well, I do think you're harmed if you're with the wrong kind of S. If I were raised by an ESTP and an ESFP, or let's say two ESFPs, what a nightmare childhood that would have been for me. Just
Mm,
SEFI all the time. My insecurity function, my polar. An ESFP and an ISFP raised Eric is a recipe for a child who's just like, you people are crazy. What is wrong with you people? You grow up and you hear people that are like, my parents were so awful to me, and sometimes you think that parent wasn't very awful. They got three other perfectly fine kids, and everybody else thinks that their parenting was fine. That's somebody who's been raised by parents that hammer their seventh and eighth slot functions, probably.
yeah. No, that's fascinating because I'm thinking about my own childhood upbringing, etc., and the impacts of that. I think I need to process it more, but there's, it's what's the word? It's echoing at your end, but there's definite food for thought in that, which I'm not going to disclose now, but
Well,
it's got my mind like processing and thinking.
I turned on the speakers because Kim came in here about 2 minutes ago, and I thought I'd turn them on so you could hear us a little bit and see if we had any questions for her or ways that we wanted to include her. We're talking about sensorism. How intuitives think sensors are dumb and don't want to hang out with sensors. They don't like sensors. They feel oppressed by sensors or something. And we were talking about how it depends which kind of intuitive you are. Like, I don't feel oppressed by SI. I feel oppressed by SE. So I don't like the ESTPs, the ESFPs. It's like, stop doing shit and let's start talking it out a bit. And
I mean, you know what I don't like.
what don't you like?
The Brittany, the ES.
ESFP.
Yeah.
Okay, so you don't like ESFP because ESFP runs very much afoul of your absolute value of consistency, plus runs afoul of your tool function of FE. Um, that's a fellow sensor, though. I mean, what kind of intuitives don't you like? You don't like ENFJs.
Well, I don't know because I don't know all the.
ENFJs are like Holly and Nick and stuff.
Yeah, don't.
Okay, why don't you like ENFJs?
I don't like their uncertainty of anything. You can't. I just don't think you can really take their word for anything.
That's interesting.
Their uncertainty of anything, huh?
And I've had 3 in my life, and all 3 of them, I just.
What do you mean by uncertain?
They just don't really know what they want. They're always talking about it, but they don't ever do it.
They don't know what they want. Huh?
Well, I mean, like, you know what?
I'm not criticizing your
I'm
answer.
just saying,
I'm just.
all of my complaints with Nick and Holly are my complaints of.
You don't feel they have a soul.
Well, I just think they're extremely manipulative, and they prey on vulnerable people.
Okay. Do you feel like they understand themselves as a singular whole being in any sense?
I'm not sure.
Can you find the center of Nick?
No,
Can you find the center of me?
I can. I don't know if I can find the center of every ENTP.
Can you find the center of Colin?
No.
Hmm.
Well, yeah.
Can you find the center of Opaloid?
No.
Okay. So okay, to me that question is, I'm asking her like, you can't find the center of somebody. I'm saying, do they resonate as a comprehensible whole person to you? And if I'm asking about SI types, she'll say yes. Do you feel like you can find the center of Delilah?
I'm still learning that.
Still learning that one. Okay.
Because
Yeah, go ahead.
no, what I was wondering about is whether what we're describing is actually sensor intuitive divisions are actually to do with what's the word, FETI and FITE, whether that's actually the central issue that differentiates.
But here's the thing. When I asked her about Colin, who's a sensor, ISTP, who's SENI, she said no. And when I asked her about Delilah, she said, I'm learning. Delilah's my kid, Colin's her kid. To me, that says NI users, she feels she doesn't get the center of them. SI users, she does. But if they're higher intuitives in stack, like ENTPs, she expresses that it's a challenge to get to the center of them, which is why we're duals. She feels that the center is probably just right within her reach at all times, which makes her want more, right? And I similarly feel like I get Kim, but she's always surprising at the same time. So I think that's the intuitive sensor difference that's meant to be together. When you've got, I'm a dominant intuitive, she's a dominant sensor, but we're meant to be together because it's the opposite end of the same axis, you know?
Yeah, I get what you're saying. It's just, how would Kim define the core of somebody or the center of somebody?
How would you define that, Kim?
Probably they're humble. Their ability to be humble.
Their ability to be humble.
Yeah, to humble themselves and put themselves in somebody else's shoes and understand. I don't know. They're so. I don't think of anything that they say as.
You want to see them be vulnerable?
Well, I think in order to be able to relate to other people, they have to be willing to also be vulnerable.
Okay. So you see Colin is not having much vulnerability?
No, I see that differently in him because he's my son. I know how to get to that.
Where's
But
the
if I-
vulnerability?
The vulnerability comes when he knows he's hurt me.
His FI,
Mm.
his 8th slot insecurity
but-
function.
Because when I was listening, I was just thinking that Kim is seeking the FI in whoever she's interacting with. That's the core of the person.
I think she's seeking fairness from him. I think when she feels hurt, she feels as though Colin's unfair to her. And when she's actually got her feelings hurt, then Collins is concerned about that. Not for FE reasons, not for appearances, but because he realizes he fucked up. It's his insecurity function. Oh shit, I should have gone and done that thing yesterday. And instead I blew it off. And that's my insecurity function. For Colin, it's, oh shit, I hurt her feelings.
I disagree. I think what she's describing when she's describing what she sees as the core or the center is actually a FI core or center.
Okay, well, when you say that he has a core, and you know it because he can be vulnerable, and he gets vulnerable when he hurts you. So, what about me? Where's my vulnerability lie?
Your vulnerability lies in like where are you most vulnerable with me?
Yeah, or where if you linked the fact that he had a center to his vulnerability, which is why Opaloid is saying you think the center is actually FI, introverted feelings. But where do you think my vulnerability lies?
Your vulnerability lies in for me it's competing with my past.
Competing with your past. So, like in terms of like sex partners or something, like wanting to be better than them or something, right? Okay, so does that link to my center as well?
Yeah.
Okay. So I get what you're saying, Opaloid, that she's seeking to hear actual vulnerability, authentic vulnerability. That authentic aspect of it is FI. But I think what she's trying to say is I want a clear, complete self-concept that I can understand you. And I can't understand you until I link it to your personal experience of, say, shame, because it's your tool function.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of meat here to be processed, I think.
Yeah, I'm curious, Kim. Is it just because you haven't experienced me enough to know what my core is, or do you think there isn't a core?
Yeah. Because you're very
Wait, he asked you if you thought you just hadn't experienced him enough, or if he has no core.
Yeah, no, I haven't experienced him enough.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
What about Liz? Do you think she has a core?
From what I gathered, I haven't been able to connect with her at all.
Okay, well, you haven't really met her much,
Right.
Okay. So what do you think? Have we made progress on the topic of sensorism and type bias and stuff? It's hard for me to even talk about it without relating it back to which kind of intuitive you are and how those values happen now. Once something's on the table, it suddenly infests everything, you know?
Yeah, I feel like it's just diffused, and we've not really, I don't know, we have, but we haven't sort of really broached it.
I'll say this to get a little bit of meat directly on topic here at the end, which is I mistyped Taylor as an ENTP for a long time because he was very smart, and I thought, well, he's too good with the arguing and the logic. He must be an ENTP. It's a mistake to think sensors are dumb. Sensors are not dumb at all. And when I worked with an ISTP the other night, and he was unable to come up with any ideation on the fly, just because he's not improvisationally creative doesn't mean he's dumb. He was able to learn everything first time and repeat it back to me almost verbatim. So that's the reality. Don't think sensors are dumb. They're not dumb. They're just not ideationally active.
So, on a parting note from me, then, I wonder whether uh, sensor bias isn't actually sensor bias at all, but it's to do with intuitives wishing to be respected and backlashing against feeling disrespected.
I mean, I think it's a reaction against the ontological pushback implicit in a world that tends to favor our insecurity and polar functions over our dominant and first functions. If you're an intuitive, at least in
Okay.
childhood.
Yeah, food for thought. Lots of food for thought. Not sure what to make of it all. If we put all of this video out, please like, subscribe, share, visit Eric's store, share your own stories, etc. We'd be interested to hear them. Hope you found this of value. Okay, and bye for now.
Yep. Thanks. Bye. Don't forget to eat plenty of cheese.